Hello and welcome back to part two of this week's Across the Gridiron. So, as teased, there's no point in waiting anymore. Eddie is pent up. He is full of rage. I can see the muscles in his arms and his eyes and his neck twitching with ferocity here. Let's go into Cowboys Corner and let's talk about Micah Parsons requesting his trade last week. So, Eddie, on the show last week, we talked about the situation and the standoff that was happening, and we bent ourselves over backwards looking at the reasons why Cowboys were doing this.
Mm,
You were firmly in the camp of they should not be doing this. This is ludicrous. I
yeah.
tried to play a little bit of devil's advocate to say, well, this could be a reason as to why, knowing full well that this will probably end up resolving itself. A couple of days later, after we probably launched that, as we published that video, he formally requested a trade and said that he does no longer want to be a Dallas Cowboy, breaking hearts of all the Eddie Equos out there across the globe. Now, players have come out in favour of Parsons. The players certainly seem to be standing with him. He's come to training. He hasn't done a lot of media, understandably, since then. But one man certainly has done media, and that's Jerry Jones, who has come out and said he will not be traded, not to lose any sleep of it. And this whole thing is just a negotiation. Now, I will say, if you're going to go and onto your phone, onto the app, onto Notes app on your phone, and write three pretty lengthy notes, that takes a long time to do. That's not a negotiation tactic.
Yeah.
But look, this obviously hurts. You called it last week. We called it a mess last week, and now that mess has really sort of transpired, and
Yeah.
it's to lower the language. It's a bit of a shit show. So, Eddie, how are you feeling?
Listen, I am I am really, really frustrated about the Dallas Cowboys. Frustrated about Jerry Jones, frustrated about Stephen Jones, frustrated about, almost the childish nature in which they run the Cowboys right now. Because you can kind of, look at teams where, we talk about the Browns a lot. We talk about, Panthers, for most of the time, and we say how dysfunctional, the organizations are. And then you look at a team that is supposed to be the banner of the NFL. This is the shining light of American football. This is the most recognizable team, out there in the globe. Most valued franchise and all of that. But then you see the owner, the GM, acting very, very childish, in a contract negotiation. And he does this every single time. He does this every single time. And you ask the question to yourself, what do the Dallas Cowboys really care about? Do they care about football or do they care about other things? Is the ego of the owner so big that it overshadows everything? People have been saying for years about Jimmy Johnson and how he left the Cowboys and, why, Jerry Jones wanted to have all the credit and so couldn't share with anyone. And, basically, sent for Jimmy Johnson. And since then, the Cowboys have been stuck in this, purgatory for 30 odd years. And make no mistake about it, the one constant throughout that whole time is Jerry Jones. Right. People can talk about the quarterbacks, can talk about Tony Romo, can talk about Dak Prescott, they can talk about Dak Prescott not being able to do it, when it really matters. But honestly, this Cowboy team had Jason Garrett as a coach for 8 bloody years, right? And during that time, people used to call him 8-8, right? Because that was fairly, about, where he typically stayed. The year before Dak Prescott came into the league, the Cowboys were 4-12, which is the reason why they were able to draft Zeke Elliott number 4 overall. They were awful. And then what happened in that year? Dak Prescott comes and takes them up 13-3. Now, everyone said, and I remember this because a lot of people, have, selective memory amnesia during that time. But the Cowboys had Zeke Elliott on a rookie contract, Dak Prescott on a rookie contract, and everyone was saying, go out there and get another wide receiver to Des Bryant to help elevate the Dak Prescott, to just give him a bit of a boost. The Cowboys, after coming off that season, decided to do wide receiver by committee, right? The next season. Basically, going into the season without any wide receivers. Why is that familiar? Oh, yeah, because this year they've done exactly the same thing to go into the season with running backs by committee. And then when it all kind of was falling into pieces, they quickly went and drafted for Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper comes in from the Raiders and Dak Prescott takes off. So what does that tell you? It tells you that, right, if you have the right kind of team, the right players, the right environment, your team can be successful, can be productive. The Eagles, right, they are the example of how to run a team, right? There are examples of this is what you do if you're a serious minded, organization, right?
This must be really hard for you to say right now.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, it is. And listen, the Eagles, right? They are not trying to disguise who they are, right? The owner, the GM understands, hey, listen, I've got a quarterback. He's good to great, right? He's not elite, he's good to great. So what am I going to do? I'm going to pay him early, right? I'm not going to pay him like the best quarterback by waiting to the last year of his contract and franchise tag him. I'll come to him 2 years, before, he gets to his due and say, hey, here you go. Let's reward you. I think you're a good quarterback, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to surround you with players that will actually elevate your game. Because Dak Prescott, right, if he plays with quality players, as you're going to see this season, he's going to be good. There's no question about that. He's shown it time and time again. See what he did with Amari Cooper. See what he's done with CD Lamb. 1,000 yards, every season that he's played. When he has good weapons, Dak Prescott is good. So there's no question about that. So the question is, what do you then do to make sure that you elevate your team and position them to win? People talk about, our sports, football here, and they talk about the importance of the coaches like Pep Guardiola, Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho, right? They look at these coaches as that X factor that pushes their team over the line. Maybe a tactics here, maybe a play here, maybe the way they call, the signal, they call the play and all of that changes things a little bit. People talk about Sean McVay in the Rams, and they say, oh, you've got Sean McVay, you've got to have a chance, right? Because the coaches make a difference. The Dallas Cowboys haven't had a competent coach in God knows how long, right? And whose fault is that? It's not the players, it's Jerry Jones, right? I said all that to say this. Micah Parsons is a generational talent, right? How did we get to this point where you have a generational talent? We're talking about Pro Bowls every single year. This guy gets double covered every play, right? You're scheming out and you're saying, where's Micah Parsons? Where's 11? Right? I need to know where 11 is, right? And then you orchestrate your game, against that. So how we get to a point where the owner says, I had a contract conversation with him in March. Now, the CBA is there for a reason. If a player has a representative, you cannot just go and talk to the player and sign a deal without that representative. It's, most average people, when you go for a job interview, right, and they like you, right, maybe they might make indications that they're going to give you a verbal offer. Nobody goes to their current employer and hands their notice without a contract in hand. You get a contract, you sign it, so you know exactly what the company is offering you, whether in terms of benefits, what all the different things are. You get all of that in writing. You sign it, you pass it over, and then you go and put in your resignation letters in your current place of work, right? I know NFL is different, and we're talking about millions and millions of pounds here, but there is no way anyone would have thought that after a conversation with Micah Parsons, that was it. and you refuse to talk to the agent. Now, some of the things that Jerry Jones have said in his comment are actually quite revealing, right? And for me, it reveals something that silently Jerry Jones is trying to say. He said something about, where are the agents when there is a problem, right? So and people were asking, why don't you want to talk to the agent? And he said, well, um, you know, when there is a problem with the player, the agent is nowhere to be found. And then drag Jay-Z into the whole thing. And I'm like, what is going on here? See, that reveals to me that Jerry Jones is not clued in. I'm not saying he's not clued in, but he's lost concept of reality in terms of modern day what happens right now. Right. Now, you look at that and you say, well, hold on a second. Is this more about a power play than anything else? Is Jerry Jones really trying to say, hey, I run the Cowboys, right? You don't. So it needs to be my way or nothing, right? He's probably the last of the old school billionaires, right, that are out there who are running the show. And I almost feel like Jerry Jones is looking at what's happening in the NFL right now, looking at power play, looking at the likes of Aaron Rodgers, what they were able to do in Green Bay, almost dictating, what happens there. Looking at Joe Burrow, who's saying, T. Higgins needed to be paid, Jamar Chase needed to be paid, and then he got paid. You know, I'm thinking to himself, well, this guys, I'm going to be paying them what 200 million or whatever. I need to remind them who's the boss. I need to remind them that in the Dallas Cowboys is Jerry Jones or bust. Because there is no reason why you take your best players, your most influential players, and you make them wait and wait and wait and wait for a contract. Now, let him just miss everyone with this whole thing of I always pay my players. He begrudgingly pays these players after he's proven that, you know what, I'm going to make you wait till the last minute because these things are emotional. You understand that the players, there's emotion in it, there's money involved for crying out loud. So the more you withhold that, the more you're almost getting power over that player. Right. Well, see what he can do. He can withhold that money from me because it makes no sense. And we're talking about this last week. I said, when we're trying to make the case about perhaps we're trying to build a core team, and not, pay Micah Parsons first. But last year, the going rate for pass rushes was 7 million less because Max Crosby was earning 34 million a year. Now, if you take that 7 million a year, that's 21 million in 3 years that you've paid one player that you could have paid three
Oh,
in free agency.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense. But the first thing I should got to ask, Eddie, is do you feel better now? Yeah, that is probably the longest. Right, I mean, that was a good solid 15 minutes, Eddie. I've got very, very, very impressed. Very impressed. But I
Oh,
think I think what it might just be worth doing. I know you've covered a lot of the ground there, but I think for people who might just trying to pick through some of what you've said there, it might just be worth just breaking down sort of the timeline on
yeah,
this, right? Because Parsons first became eligible for a contract extension in the 2023 season, so
yeah,
2 years ago, right?
yeah,
But the off season went by, nothing happened, no conversations, nothing, right?
yeah.
The first time it really became a deal, the first time Parsons put pressure on was sort of in February 2024.
Hmm.
That he based and correctly as it turned out, and this is exactly what you were going to say, what you were just saying, that if you don't pay me now, my price tag is going to go up,
Yeah,
right? And this is back in February 2024, right? So this is like 18 odd months ago, right? And he said at that time that if the Cowboys are ready, I am ready, right? But if they don't get in touch, I'm just going to go out, have another Pro Bowl year. I'm going to smash it out of the park, and my value's going to go up. Which, funnily enough, that's exactly what happens. And then, of course, you had the big thing you were just talking about. Myles Garrett signed an extension for the Browns at 40 million a year, right? And it could be argued that Parsons is a better player than Garrett. right? So when you have that, all of a sudden, the Cowboys, they can't pay him 30 million, as you said, 31 million, 32 million. They're going to have to pay him more than 40, right? So he wants to be the highest paid defender, so they'll have to pay him over that 40 million mark, which is what Garrett was on, right? So again, that happened first. And the next stage, this is a bit I think's quite this is a bit I think where it gets really interesting. It's because from the Cowboys' perspective, from Jerry Jones' perspective, they agreed a contract with Parsons in
Yeah,
what Parsons thought was just an informal chat between owner and player, right? Jerry Jones is annoyed because they thought they agreed everything there, but it was pretty much just an agreed in principle. And this is from the spring of this year, right?
yeah,
So they agreed it. They discussed it personally, but things broke down when, as you said, that Parsons very correctly and rightly said, "Speak to my agent and let's get it finalised." Most football players up and down the league, all professional sports people generally, get agents to sign and cross the T's and dot the I's, right? But Jones and Parsons' agent have not spoke, right? Parsons turned up to mini camps and to training, but he's come in and said, "I'm doing this for my teammates. I am doing it for the Cowboys. I am not doing it for Jerry Jones." And then I think that's when the weird things coming out. CEO Stephen Jones saying that Parson needs to want to be paid. And we talked about this last week, which is such a bizarre comment. And it wasn't, it was literally a few days after that, Friday last week, where Parsons comes out and says that he's had enough and he wants to go. Right. So this just seems completely mismanaged from top to bottom.
yeah.
If you want to build your defense around, as what you called him, a generational talent, pay him early, get him locked in for those few years, and then move on. Build your team around him. But so they've waited. Price tag's gone up, it's gone up, and it's gone up. And then you've got the CEO saying he needs to want to be paid and putting it squarely back on the player, probably pissing the player off even more. The teammates are rallying around the player, and I think this is going to potentially still get a little bit messy. Because I think Parsons still got another 2 years left, hasn't he?
So,
And
so
they could slap the franchise tag on him,
yeah,
you
so
know,
he's on his last contract here, right? So he's
last
got
year, right?
20, yeah, last year, 24 million they're gonna pay him. What then happens next year is that the Cowboys could franchise tag him, which should be the average of the top players. So probably be about 30 something
Hmm.
million a year. And what could happen really is that if they franchise tag him, Michael Parsons could say he's not signing it. He's not signing the franchise tag. Now, what then that means is that you have a player who's not signed the franchise tag and who's not playing, right? And then the Cowboys will have no choice at some point than to trade him because it's like, he might say, I've got a bad back. And you saw Gary Jones, reference the bad back, which honestly, I don't understand why you do that. There is something, about valuing your team and the people that work for you, to kind of denigrate them in public. And he was basically saying the bad back and the trade requests are similar in the sense that they are not real.
Hmm.
Micah Parsons doesn't strike me as a kind of person that, says stuff and doesn't back it up.
Hmm.
Right. So I think he's thought about this trade request completely. And right now, he's happy for it to be played either way. Because one
Yeah,
thing he knows is that whether it's in Dallas or it's somewhere in the moon, he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL. No
yeah.
question about that.
I just think this has been building at Dallas for a while now. I mean, look, the matter of the fact is the star players ask for trades all the time, right? There's one going on in Washington right now with their wide receiver,
Terry
McLaurin.
McLaurin, yeah.
Exactly, right. So this happens up and down the league every season. But for the Cowboys, it happens, but it never gets to this stage, right? There's
Mm,
always drama, right? Prescott, you mentioned, CD Lamb, Zach Martin, Zeke Elliott, Des Bryant in the past. There's always been contract drama.
yeah.
but it never gets to that point because whether, as you said, that Jerry Jones reluctantly finally pays them begrudgingly, but this is happening. This is a pattern now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can't keep poking the bear being all of the players essentially, and hoping that everybody falls in line. Because again, I know you seem to think the Cowboys are going to win Super Bowl this year, but the Cowboys haven't really been a hugely successful team for a number of years now,
And
right?
why do you think that is?
Well, exactly.
How many successful organization has an 82-year-old actively pulling the strings?
Yeah, I mean we're not going to go down the ageism route, I guess, but the fact remains that that Jones is now seems to be actively holding them back
Yeah.
because those players I've just mentioned, they're being paid a lot of money, and you think if you paid all of them earlier when you could, you would save yourself a lot of money. You'd have a bigger team around it. You'd have a more harmonious team around it, and yeah, I think it's quite clear that that man is holding things back. But I know that we can talk about this probably for another hour and a half. But let's just move on slightly because look, we've talked about what could happen, that he could stay, and as I said right at the beginning of this part two, that Jerry Jones is telling fans not to sweat it, not to lose sleep over it, because this is all part of a negotiation process, and you know Parsons is going to be a Cowboy this year. But from your perspective, let's look at the worst case scenario, and he does get traded. Where do you think he goes? Would it be fly Micah fly? Which
Listen, this.
I would just love to see that. I I would. I don't buy NFL jerseys because they're bloody expensive here in the UK. But I would buy an Eagles jersey with Parsons on it if he moved. I would pay every penny in my savings to have that, and I would wear that every single week.
Listen, the Eagles is always an option, right? I've seen lots of players posting stuff on social media calling for Micah to come to the Eagles. He said lots of good stuff about the Eagles and all of that. But let me pick other teams so I can at least, make a case for those teams. I think that a team that would trade for Micah Parsons would be a team that is very close to winning the Super Bowl, knowing fully well that even if they trade first round picks, they're not going to need them for 2 or 3 years, right? So a team that has a quarterback that is already solidified, a team that already has the pieces around, so they're not looking to draft, a wide receiver, or a running back. They just need that extra player, a bit like what Von Miller did, going, into a team, get them over the line, the Rams into the Super Bowl. You need it's almost like an Aaron Donald type effect in a Super Bowl where you got a player that, in the playoffs, he's just going to go and wreak havoc. Um, so a number of teams, come to mind for me. One, the Ravens, right? The Ravens are so close, to getting the Super Bowl. They've got a quarterback that's good. They've got Derrick Henry doing his thing. They've got wide receivers, who can actually go and do the business. So I'm thinking, well, Isaiah Likely, you've got Mark Andrews, you've got Zay Flowers. These are all very, very good players, right? Then you go to the other team that for me that could do with Micah Parsons is the Bills, right? You got
Hmm.
Josh Allen, right? They've got they're close, right? Imagine Micah Parsons, playing with the Bills and they are playing the Chiefs, right? Even the one few times that the Cowboys have played the Chiefs, Mahomes have felt, Micah Parsons, as a threat. So I think the Ravens, I think the Bills, those are teams in the AFC. In the NFC, the Rams. The Rams could, if they trade for Micah Parsons, I mean, they probably got a couple of, players right now, and they're thinking, yeah, we were that close. We almost got to the championship. So, you know what? Get a player like Michael Parsons. I mean, I don't think he would want to go to a team that is, sort of like low down there, maybe like the Panthers, or the Titans, or teams like that, right? Because that you're still worried about whether they've got a quarterback, you don't know what it's gonna look like. So you probably want to go to a contender. Um, and yeah, he could go to the Steelers. Imagine TJ Watt and Micah Parsons on the same team. That would just I would just change my prediction about the AFC North
Yeah.
if he goes to the Steelers.
I think you make a couple of good points there. I think that the main thing is where does he want to go somewhere where he's going to get paid, or does he
Yeah,
want to go somewhere where he can win?
yeah.
Because for someone like the Panthers or the Bears or the Browns, these are the guys who might have the cap space that they can pay him the 45 mil, whatever it is he wants. He could probably go and get paid there, but he's not going to win there, right?
Mm,
Um, I think so. Like the Bills, I think is a really good shout because he can win there. And if the Bills have any kind of problems, probably on the defense, but they don't really have cap space.
mm,
That would come at a big sort of cost for them. I think one potentially interesting shout, and I hope this doesn't happen as a Dolphin, it would be the Patriots. So Patriots, Mike Vrabel, linebacker himself, you know, it can bring him in, and that's a mean looking defense. If you put Parsons in the Patriots, bloody hell, that is a hell of a
yeah.
defense. But then there's a couple
Yeah.
of then there's also the Chargers, for instance. I mean, we talked about the Chargers quite a bit. They have Khalil Mack, who's got a 1 year extension, but he's at the ripe old age of 34. I,
Mm,
I know you look at 34 like a distant memory, but still 34 in NFL terms is quite old. So they will soon need a new sort of anchor, a new sort of stable of that defensive line,
yeah.
and maybe Parsons could be someone to do that. And again, the Chargers are a potential dark horse. So I think it comes down to what team needs him most, and what team can afford him, right?
Yeah.
If you're asking me, what I think is most likely is he remains a Cowboy for this year.
Yeah.
Um, and then, well, certainly for the next couple of weeks, it depends how toxic this gets because we've talked about Jones isn't doing himself any favors with the way that they've been acting. But this is, as I said, this is uncharted territory, I think, for Dallas because it never normally gets this far.
Yeah.
And I think Jones has poked the bear too much on this one.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, look, it'll be interesting to see. But we said we try and keep this particular video half an hour long, and we have done half an hour. So you've
We've
done
done
really,
well.
you have done very well. You only ranted for 15 minutes of that. So I suppose just a very, very quick word. I think he'll probably remain a Cowboy.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Is Are we going to see Parsons a Cowboy when the season starts?
Um, I would say not at the start of the season. We're only literally, what are we, 5 weeks
Yep.
thereabout from the season opener? I don't see how this contract gets sorted in 5 weeks. That's my problem.
Hmm.
Um, Considering the fact that they've had no conversations whatsoever with the agent, and Jerry Jones has a real problem with talking to the agent. So I don't know how you're going to get around that. So this week is gone. Probably next week is gone. So now what you're looking at, what, 3 weeks, to try and, sort out a deal this magnitude because the numbers are gonna be crazy. The years are gonna be crazy. The guarantees are gonna be crazy. There is a lot to get through. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, yeah, it, I think maybe the first game of the season, Micah Parsons might be in his pajamas on the sideline. Um,
Well, you can do that's what we tend to do here in the UK, isn't it? Because of the size of the games. So but no, I think that's a fair shout. So I will ask everybody watching. Where do you think? Um, yeah, Micah Parsons will end up. Where will he be at week 1, and where will he be in week 4? That's also one of the big questions. As you said, he may well still be a Cowboy when week 1 rolls around, but will he see out the season? Who knows? So Eddie, thanks again for your time. Thanks everyone for watching. Hit that like, subscribe. You know, sack that subscribe button and all this kind of fun stuff. Eddie, take us home.
Honestly, I feel like I have lost, a couple of pounds, in the last couple of minutes talking about Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons shouldn't be begging for a seat at the table. He is the table. If Jerry Jones wants to play hardball, fine, but don't act surprised when the locker room starts feeling the weight. So hey, listen, appreciate everyone who's joined, the podcast today. And don't forget, loyalty means nothing, not at your job, and definitely not at the Cowboys. And if it's not working well, you know what to do. Put in that trade request because that's what you need to do to get out of the current situation. But hit that like and subscribe button, guys, and don't forget to join us for more of our NFL UK flavored rants.
Yeah, I've already put in my trade request to the Pat McAfee show. They've got much more views than we have. And I'm sure they're drunk half the time anyway. All right,
This
Eddie.
is true.
See you next week, my friend.
All right. Bye-bye.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the